Hey, hey! I am indeed America's most trusted news stork. I'm here to be a stork, delivering news, dropping it swaddled in baby blankets through your chimney, which you will now absorb. I feel great. I don't know about you guys. I'm definitely not drowning in my own mucus, unlike some people I know. Man, it's funny how things get interesting very quickly, isn't it? Obviously, the big news that just happened is that Trump went on to Twitter and said, yeah, no checks before the election. If you vote for me, maybe you'll get one, which is the perfect type of dumbass politicking that a moron like Trump would do, thinking that it was smart. Like, he thinks that that's genius. Like, oh no, people are going to want to check and then they're going to vote for me to get one. Forgetting the fact that Biden is also saying that he would give checks and bigger ones. And the fact that with any of Trump's promises to make things better if you vote for him, the problem always is, well, why don't you do it now? Why don't you make my life better now? You're literally waiting. You're telling me I only can get my life better at all, whether it's stopping the rioting or getting checks to people, if you vote for me. And it's not supposed to be that explicit, you know? That's the thing with Trump, is that he takes the implicit premises of a lot of politicking, the stuff that people are supposed to only be subliminally suggested, and he makes it explicit. And when it comes to stuff like race and dog whistles turning into shouts, people freak out about it. But the fact is that in general, it's a little heavy-handed, and I don't know if it always has the effect he wants it to have. And I think in this case, it's a disastrously terrible idea. The fact that they're letting him do this, honestly, tells me that the Republicans have written him off. They have made the smart choice to say he is a polarizing figure. His value is no longer extant. We've squeezed all the juice we can out of this particular lemon. And now the best thing to do, especially since we've secured the courts forever from the entire federal apparatus up to the Supreme Court, we can just sit back, let the Democrats flail around for 4 years, fail to deal with any of the problems that we've created, and in fact, do our best to obstruct any attempt at fixing them, which of course will be minimal because the Democrats don't have any more interest in fixing anything than we do, and then come sweeping back in 2024 and take the presidency, which of course is always what people who are terrified of, what comes after Trump. I don't know what that is. I've given up guessing. I will say, though, I really think this is true. Less than a month before an election, with the entire economy reeling and people facing mass eviction and huge loss in income, to not get a second round of checks out to people before the election, it just tells me that right-wing populism that people are afraid of happening, the sort of Josh Hawley, Herrenvolk democracy where we get white Medicare for all or something, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that that's going to occur. I think that the Republican Party is still well in control by capital, as is the Democratic Party, and capital has a bipartisan consensus to not get people too used to free money from the government. And as such, no one has that much leeway to really be the Huey Long-esque, every man a king figure from either party, you know? And so that means that we're just going to get more culture war, I would say, on the horizon, while the material conditions just keep getting worse. And with no one doing really even suggesting anything to be done about them, and no bidding war along actual economic axis. It's going to be pure grievance. And I mean, I can get it from McConnell's perspective. Like, McConnell, he's going to get Amy Cohen brothers on the court. And that's all he really cares about, all he's had his eye on. And he doesn't really care who the president is, because he rightly understands that at this point it's sort of meaningless. As long as the constraints, as long as the aperture of political action stays where it is, and making sure that there isn't even a possibility of Trump becoming a populist kingpin as long as that's off the table, then he doesn't really have to worry. And now it's off the table. The fact that Trump allowed them to do this really does speak to the fact that he's too stupid to assert the authority that he could have, because it is amazing. He is a person who hypothetically could go to war with the entire political apparatus. He could go to war with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and create and really create a third force in American politics. But it would have to be somebody other than him to do that. But nobody other than him could be in a position to do that. To me, that's endlessly fascinating. The only person who could have threaded the needle in 2016 was Donald Trump. But because he was Donald Trump, he does not have the interests, the political agenda or ambition or vision. Like, he's not a political person. He doesn't actually care about the structure of American politics in any way, which means that he has spent no time in the last 4 years actually doing anything to stand out from conventional Republicans when it comes to governing. It's all been at the level of rhetoric and at the level of spectacle, because it would require too much investment to try to push back against the dominant ideologies within the Republican Party, as evidenced by the fate of poor Steve Bannon, who got turfed within 6 months because there was nobody else who had his back, and it sure shit wasn't going to be Trump either. And now the upshot of that is that they are willing to sacrifice him, and someone convinced him that this was the smart thing to do, because it's like, I guess because it makes him feel like he's in charge, to tell them, yeah, no more stimulus. You got to elect me to get more stimulus, with no understanding that this means that he is now the man who is taking responsibility for people suffering through this fucking crisis for at least months with no end in sight. Astounding. Amazingly. Amazing. You know what? We love it, folks, don't we? And of course, this is now making it look more and more like you could see a genuine landslide, which could lead to Biden winning and the Democrats taking the Senate. And it will be very fascinating to watch them fail to do anything with that power on purpose. That'll be very entertaining to watch. And I think that's really what McConnell's bet is, and it's a good one, is that he doesn't really have anything to fear from the Democrats in power in terms of really changing the dynamics of power or influence in government, or changing popular perceptions of what government can do or the responsibility to you. So he's in the catbird seat with it, or I guess the turtle bird seat, I should say, or the cat turtle seat. Actually, just the turtle seat. No other animal, just the turtle seat. He's there. He's on his flat hot rock. He's sunning himself. He's in his glory. And Nancy Pelosi, of course, thinks that she's being a genius too. It's so funny. Her attempt is very clear. Like, she doesn't have any incentive to see checks go up before election day either, right? She wants to see Trump have this around his neck. But usually you would have to worry about your opponent realizing the obviousness of that and not falling into the trap you've laid. Meanwhile, they just led Trump out to fall onto the spikes like a fucking cow, just because they told him that he'd look very strong if he did that. You look very strong, Mr. President. And yes, people are definitely going to care more about, in the last 3 weeks before the election, they're going to be much more invested in this fucking religious weirdo nobody's ever heard of than getting actual money in their bank account. You're 100% right about that, Mr. President. Someone says Amy Kevin Garnett. That's good. Amy, that's actually one of the best ones. Amy Kevin Garnett. That's not bad. So yeah, Pelosi is being gifted in her enemies, which is the greatest blessing you can have. Which of course is the blessing that Trump had when he had to run against Hillary. And I really hope that this election, this 2020 final, will really clarify retroactively that whole phenomenon and tell us that the whole Trump phenomenon really was, partially at least, I mean, obviously it has real basis, but the phenomenon of him being the president for 4 years is sort of an Indian summer situation created by the specific catastrophic insanity of having Hillary Clinton run for president. I mean, just the only person who could have lost that election. And I think that over time, I think at the time people recognized that she was the only person who could have lost that election. But then Trump's specific center of gravity, his ability to consume all light, kind of obscured that. And he became the whole world. And I think a lot of people kind of lost that perspective and started thinking, okay, things are different now. We're in a new world. I know I felt like that sometimes. But I think now people are sort of sobering up a little bit, 200,000 dead, no coronavirus release. And like there could have been something to Trump. But as I said, he would have had to have been a different person. And since he wasn't, it's going to end up being this false dawn. And I think I don't think we're going to get some sort of Herrenvolk movement because there clearly is not any interest in that at the level of establishment Republican power. And the only way that you can say that could be counteracted at the grassroots is if you were to have somebody who could take Trump's entire base in hand, but direct it like to an actual political goal, which is what people say they're worried about Tucker or whatever happened, or Josh Hawley or Cotton doing. And as I said yesterday, I don't think any of those guys have the range. I don't think any of them can fill that role. They could get a chunk, but I don't think they're going to get the whole thing, which is what they need to be effective against resisting the actual party that they're trying to push against. Because we have seen what happens when you try to move from use party structures in this country against the parties. When Trump did it in 2016, there was minimal resistance at the institutional level just because he was only seen as a transient threat until he became the candidate, at which point he was seen as someone who could be controlled, which largely he has been. Like at the individual level, a lot of these guys have been humiliated, and some of them are going to die because they thought that they could control Trump. Like fucking Chris Christie, for example, thought he was going to be attorney general or some shit. And now he's just coughing his ass out in fucking New Jersey. But the institutions and the people who actually hold institutional power are largely still where they were before. But Bernie, on the other hand, the Democrats threw out all the fucking stops and made sure that he wasn't going to be able to challenge the institutional prerogatives of the Democratic Party. And I don't think there's anybody on the horizon who can channel that Trump lightning in a bottle but not be a TV dumbass. Because him being a TV dumbass is such a huge part of it. You can't disentangle him. Like the idea of Trumpism without Trump is a little incoherent. Like it's the same thinking that a lot of people use to say, oh, like we can repitch socialism like through the lens of patriotism or whatever, or like do entitlement reform, but push expansion of entitlements, but using nationalist language when these things are coded in certain ways that are intertwined, at like the symbolic level, and pulling one meaning out of them is beyond the abilities of any one individual. The only person who can capture the imagination the way Trump did is somebody who is a being of pure spectacle, of pure TV game show energy without any heart to it. If he had a heart, if he had a political valence, his career would have been different, and he wouldn't have been able to be everybody to everyone the way that he was. Grant Cardone. Who the hell is that? Who the fuck is Grant Cardone? If I've never heard of him, I'm not worried about him. I'll say that. And the Kanye thing, no. Kanye doesn't have the, focus to do it. I'm going to look at some cards. Gonna look at some Gulf War trading cards, see what's going on. He's a Scientologist, social media guru, and real estate creep. Well, that guy sounds cool, and I could definitely see him becoming like a crooked senator or something, but I don't think he's going to lead the political party in 4 years. What do we got? we've got the M60 main battle tank. This thing looks pretty cool. It's got a 105 millimeter gun for more firepower. It was an important part of the Desert Storm. You know, they still make tanks. They still make a ton of tanks. And the Army actually says, we don't need any more tanks. And then they just requisition more because we have places that build tanks. And so we just say, no, you need more tanks. And so they just have these giant tank graveyards where they just all hang out. Don't do anything. Don't use them for anything. It's pretty amazing. Then there's another one. Ooh, here we go. Syria. Oh, that'll come up. That'll pop up a little later. Didn't get any credit from Uncle Sam for being on our side in the Gulf War. That's the one thing we need to know about America, is that those hoes ain't loyal. That is one thing we know about. Oh my God. Military skill. Heroes don't do drugs. None of the U.S. Armed Services tolerates drug use. Drugs impair the ability to think and move. Just like in civilian life, a soldier's success and survival depend on clear thoughts and careful actions. Good soldiers and good civilians never take chances with illegal drugs. And here we got geography. Jerusalem. I don't know what this has to do with the war in Iraq. It's interesting how they kind of sneak in these like references to Israel, like sideways in the cards as sort of a background context for our deep investment in the Middle East as strategic terrain, but they don't say it explicitly. Jerusalem and Athens, the two cities. But I also think that Trump doesn't want to be president anymore. I mean, at this point especially, he was not having fun before he got the novel coronavirus, and now he is, I think, legitimately miserable. But I think, yeah, this Biden term is going to be very interesting because it's going to be a real lab test. It's going to be the exact same immiseration and horror and corruption and institutional failure and rot that we have seen in the last 4 years, but there will be none of the hysteric cultural frenzy around his presidency the way there is with Trump. And what fills that void? That's what I want to know. What cultural fixation? Like, do we really get into flagpole sitting and stuffing people into elevators like it's, or telephone booths like it's the 1920s? Like, is it bear baiting? What do we get? What do we do? What do we do to fill our emotional void that all this politics is going to leave? How are we going to process? Because right now we're processing the trauma of the political moment through the spectacle of the Trump presidency. But Biden's presidency is going to be intentionally diffused of that symbolic energy. But that energy's got to go somewhere. Avatar 2, someone says. I agree. That would be amazing if the Biden term is just Avatar mania, like Avatar takes over and people are getting full body Na'vi tattoos and they're turning into reenactment societies, and there's entire intentional communities that are trying to recreate Pandora, people living in trees and fucking each other with synthetic tails that they've had surgically implanted onto their bodies. Let's do it. And then James Cameron can run for president as a third-party candidate. Although he is Canadian, that could be a problem. But he'll be so popular that we will elect him and overturn the constitutional amendment on the same day by acclamation. So and most importantly, how are all the people, including myself, who've like turned politics into an identity, how are they going to walk down from that? Or are they not? Are they going to somehow find a way to get that wound up in the machinations of the Biden administration? This senescent old man just sitting in the Oval Office talking to Corn Pop in his head. He's having a meeting with Corn Pop and Jane Mansfield. Bo is there, of course, and his dead wife, and they're all just talking about how they're going to pass a bill to make sure that root beer tastes good again. And meanwhile, the gears just continue to turn, and you get reassured that, well, you know, if the Democrats just had 75 senators, we could finally get something done. And it's your fault. You didn't believe in them enough to vote to make sure that there were 100 Democratic senators, which would allow us to actually make things better. $1 billion senators. Let's do it. 1 billion American senators. Every man a senator, but no one wears a sash. That's one thing we could bring to American politics. They have that in Latin America a lot. Sashes. Sashes of office. You know? We don't wear enough sashes in American politics. Japan has sashes. Everyone's got sashes but us. God, we make politics such a spectacle, and yet we don't have any of the fun appearances of that. My favorite attempt was Nixon. During Nixon's term, he made an attempt to have the Secret Service wear uniforms, and they basically looked like they were in a marching band. They had piping, and they had, I think, epaulets and white gloves. And everyone thought it was very goofy and embarrassing, and they got rid of it pretty quickly. But yeah, for a brief period under Nixon, the Secret Service wore uniforms. And that makes sense because Nixon was one of those guys who actually did take seriously the presidency as we imagine it, right? Because the only way the presidency makes sense is an office, given how much power they're officially bestowed within the constitutional order and how much focus they have in our political mind, in our political imagination. That person is essentially the one-man embodiment of the state, like truly, like l'état de moi type deal. You are in charge of everything. Relations with every country in the world, the grand trajectory of American foreign policy and domestic policy. And when you talk about things like global warming, the fucking future of the habitability of the habitability of the fucking planet, which is, of course, insane and crazy, and no president can actually do that. And most of them, I think, understand at a certain level that that's not the actual job. But Nixon thought it was. Nixon thought that he was at the crossroads of all human history, and that he was the one man who saw the future of the American project and was the one man who could steward it to successful fruition, meaning that he saw the end of unipolarity. He saw the end because he saw the end of he saw the end of America as the industrial heart of the world economy. He saw the end of America as the producer, and he saw that it was going to become a consumer, because when he removed gold convertibility, he ended the final vestige of the gold standard with the dollar. It meant that dollar circulation was going to be predicated on budget or on trade deficits, which meant we were going to have to produce much less and buy much more. And that meant that we weren't going to be in that position of our golden age, and that we were going to have to basically negotiate away from that to a multipolar world. And he was the only one who saw it, and he was going to do whatever it took to make it happen, which, of course, is why he was an isolated maniac who tried to run the entire foreign policy of the United States out of his own office with Henry Kissinger, and why the intelligence community saw him as a threat, and why he spent his last years in office getting shit-faced on the White House on the presidential yacht and watching Patton. Because that job is not The job as created and conceived of is not doable and shouldn't exist. Like I said this after 2016, Trump should be the last president, and I hold strong to that. And the fact that we're the fact that we're about to elect Biden by such a huge, if it happens, such a big margin, proves that, because clearly no one really believes that this job is what we think it is. So why not get rid of it? Why not remove this absurd anachronism from our system if we're so cavalier with it that we're just going to let anybody who's either entertaining or tells us reassuring stories about putting hairnets on and fighting people with bike chains in the 1950s like it's the concrete jungle. No more presidents. Come on. Get out of here with the presidency. I'm looking at some of these questions. What's the best ape? Gotta say, not humans, certainly. Orangutans seem pretty chill. I like those guys. Gorillas, too. I mean, chimps are generally considered kind of assholes. And, of course, that's because they're the most similar to humans. Give me like a nice chill orangutan. Nice chill vibing orangutan. People are saying things like gibbons and stuff. Those are not apes. Those are monkeys. That's a different question. How dare you? Okay, so I watched the first episode of The Good Lord Bird. And I don't know how many episodes there are. It was only the first one. I will say that I really, really did not like it. It was basically the exact opposite of what I would want out of something like that. And I understand that it's based on a book and like that it's not about John Brown. Like John Brown's a character in another story. But I get that. I just think that the approach to the material is bad. I think that it's not interesting, is I guess what I'd say, because I'm not interested in how we, from this perspective, this point in history, like view this kind of stuff, because that's pretty easily divinable. I think trying to recreate that psychic terrain and like grapple with, history as a foreign country is much more interesting. And I did not feel that from that at all. It really, it killed me. The first scene is it's John Brown about to be hanged, being taken to the gallows, and it's a voiceover from the main character, who is this former slave who was liberated as a child in Kansas by John Brown and knew him over the last decade or so of his life. And he says some black people think that he's he was a hero. Some black people think he was some bullshit white savior. And that just like stabbed me in the fucking heart, because okay, that's understandable from now, right? Like, yes, I can understand anybody saying that now, black or white or any other racial background, saying like this is that like maybe not even as a real person, but like as a historical personages and as a character that people like cleave to one way or the other, that he is a white savior. Yes. But do I think that a character who lived through that period would say that or think that or communicate that as a belief? I don't think so. And that's the violence to the historical tapestry that I find kind of repulsive. Were people really thinking about like, oh, sick of these Mayo-ass white saviors? And when slavery was happening and John Brown was one of a handful of white people to take black equality seriously to the point of risking his own life and life of his family? Maybe, but I'll say this. I've never seen it. I've not seen any evidence that was anything like a common view. And it just, more than anything, feels not interesting. It just feels like I can get these takes on Twitter. I don't need them in a show. So I will watch the whole thing, but I'm not happy about it. Did not like Ethan Hawke at all, because he's playing it as a complete psycho, like absolute maniac. And we'll see where it goes with that. Like this might be a misdirect, but watching the first episode, I really got the impression that the show was essentially taking at face value the old Dunning School claim that John Brown had to have been insane because you'd have to be insane to be a white man and take equality seriously. But now this is like, in this moment, the woke take is that, yeah, white people can't really be not racist. And the idea of any white person truly pursuing like equality in life is in some way delusional or is racist, but not in a way that they can recognize. And I think that that's a kind of like race pessimism that I think is, one, wrong, and two, really depressing and frankly fucking politically counterproductive, because I just do not see the upshot here where everyone is supposed to believe that racial chasms are unbridgeable. We cannot really ever cooperate across racial lines except white people being compelled by guilt. That's the only way. And yet somehow we're going to create a coalition in this moment of profound crisis that will have the necessary trust to be able to operate meaningfully. I don't think so. I think the opposite is what you're fucking building, is you're building a situation where if fracture comes, people are going to be told from one end of the fucking spectrum to the other that the only safe harbor is race, is the certainty of race. And you'll have like a few academic white people who will take that to mean, well, I need to abnegate my race like pathologically, and I'm going to just be the opposite of what I think my identity is, which good luck with that. That's a recipe for psychological schizophrenia, honestly, or you recognize, and everyone else is going to just end up going back towards racial politics at its most suspicious and hostile, and that means that every demagogue of every stripe will be able to guarantee that there's never any meaningful resistance to the capitalist onslaught of total spiritual and material alienation and destruction. So I'll keep an eye on it, but not very pleased with the first episode. And also, just from a pure aesthetic perspective, it did this thing where it would just like skip scenes and just like kind of jump ahead, and it kind of deflated any kind of dramatic tension and made it feel just sort of like it had that like and then picturesque feeling that I tend not to like, because it drains things of momentum. So anyway, we'll see. Not encouraged after the first episode. Gibbons are apes? Really? Huh. I didn't know. I thought gibbons had tails. Learned something new. Chris is here. He's laying in the cut. He's looking at the comments. He's judging all of you for your bad questions. He's got a list of bad questions, and he has your handles next to them. And after 3 strikes, you get banned. Isn't that right, Chris?
I actually am not sure how to ban people from the chat.
Oh.
I also watched Good Lord Bird.
Oh, what do you think?
I probably liked it more than you. I am familiar with the John Brown mythos, though I don't have a premeditated take on how I would want to portray it. I've listened to your takes on it and what you would like to see. I understand your criticism of Hawk's performance, but I do think that even given what you've discussed, I appreciate, even though it is, as you say, that he's playing him as a total psychopath, not psychopath, but a crazy person here. It is like a half step away from what you would want to portray, is that, the religious fervor and belief people felt at that time is incredibly alien to us today.
Yeah.
Although I will say that it was often played, like when he was talking to that rabbit about, whether it felt God in its heart or whatever, as a joke.
Well, the thing is that he's the only one who's that religiously. Even his sons and stuff are all rolling their eyes at it. Like every other character is modern, and except for him.
Yeah.
And to me, so he's just this absolute specimen of like a pre-modern era that is like caught in a glass jar. But what that does is it turns his anti-slavery sentiment just into another pathology of religious mania. Mm-hmm. Like, not that it's rooted in anything. Like, I think that you could make it. I would argue, was John Brown insane? Of course, John Brown was insane, because the only coherent definition of insanity is a social one, right? Like, you can't say that insanity has some sort of intrinsic definition to a person that is not just a social context. Because we're all building reality in our heads. The only way we know if they're conforming to the real world is if other people agree with us. And John Brown was insane, because to be a white man in that era and to truly believe in racial equality was to be, by the social mores of the time, to be insane. It was a disordered thought. It was not a rational or reasoned response to the world around you, because everyone knew that wasn't the case. And worst of all, you ended up, if you believe that kind of thing in that social context, over time, your actions will become more violent and erratic because of the inability of you to live in accordance with those beliefs. So yes, he was insane, but that says more about like the social order of the time. And to me, what I got from this, and we'll see if it persists, is that the show has that cynical, like half-wise, like Afro-pessimist thing of like, yeah, that was always true. And John Brown was kidding himself to think that America could ever think that black and white people were equal, which made him insane. And so therefore all those white racists were more right and more sane than he was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll see, though.
Yeah. I mean, currently reading a little bit of 19th century American history, one of the things that stands out to me is, we've all been keyed up, especially over the last 4 years, of, the constant frettering that America's on the brink of some psychological break. And just really diving into the, especially like post-1830, the state of your average politically engaged American, the amount of edging towards insanity over basically over the slavery issue, it seems much, much higher.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually did a war.
We did.
Yeah.
Yes.
But just the general tenor of denunciations, renunciations, even just the language that people would use in mainstream from one congressperson to another.
They were beating each other up in Congress.
Yeah, about like the perfidy and destitution of soul and spirit of the opposing sides, and then was about as it's just on a whole nother level of keyed up. It's on that alien level where it is foreign to even try to comprehend how these people built these issues in their psyche.
Yeah.
Because they are insane issues. It's an issue of agreeing with or disagreeing with the widespread social acceptance of human bondage.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem to me to take like the premise that it is in fact slavery that makes that mania. It is the imposition of that system that drives the mania, Mm-hmm. Rather, it's this cynical after the fact observation of, well, look what happened after the war. Look at our failure to integrate black people into American society at every level. Look at the persistence of racism. Well, maybe those rough border ruffians in Kansas, I mean, they won. They were right. And John Brown, therefore, from our perspective, is the insane one, because his dream was unattainable in this country. And I don't know if like I said, I don't think that cynicism is warranted, and I sure shit don't think it's politically useful. And considering how much it suffuses so much fucking art nowadays, I do not find it something interesting or evocative to watch.
I did appreciate our boy from Lodge 49, young Kurt Russell, showing up as a young Jeb Stuart.
Yes, young Jeb Stuart. He did a decent job with the accent.
I mean, he's got the face for a Civil War guy.
Definitely, and the beard. But yeah, I think I'm going to do now, after this is over, I'm going to watch the whole thing. I'm going to do a inebriated past on John Brown and the coming of the Civil War and his sort of place in American history, because I feel like we're losing it. It's like we went from Dunning School, where he was crazy for thinking black people were equal, because obviously they aren't, to now he's crazy because he thought white people could be not racist, which obviously they can't be. Which, to me, both of them lead to the same place. Some sort of racial separation and endless racial conflict defining American society until a point of apocalyptic confrontation. Because what's the alternative? If you can't have one polity, if you cannot have a transracial American polity that can coordinate across racial lines and trust one another across racial lines to build a project and to invest in it, then how the hell are we going to be anything other than just stripped of everything and then set to war against one another on the most flimsy premises and across the most cynically reified racial and absolutely fundamentally illusory racial differences?
I'm gonna switch topics for a bit just because it's funny that this came up today with an ongoing project I have. But I have an answer for your question of where all that anima goes in the Joe Biden administration, that cultural fervor that we've built ourselves into arguing over the president, and it is arguing in eternity about whether infinite jest is good or not.
God. It's eternal recurrence on Twitter. If you don't believe in eternal recurrence, just spend a year on Twitter and note how many times the same arguments at the exact same contours come up over and over again. It's like they're fucking volcanoes. They build up, they have to burst forth. Everybody gets their fucking David Foster Wallace takes out of their system, and then they go back into dormancy until they arise again. There's something about I don't know what it is. There's some sort of gender anxiety, I guess.
It's so funny that is the thing that became such a locus of gender anxiety around it. So the background of this is that a few weeks ago, Molly, my wife, and I started a project because she has read Infinite Jest multiple times, loves the book, and I have never read Infinite Jest. And we keep seeing these things come up, and we were like, we need to I mean, excuse me for being flippant, but we need to queer this narrative and have the woman of the couple read to me the book. And so that's what we're doing in a podcast. She's reading it on the podcast as an audiobook and to me, and then we're chatting about it afterwards. And we did it especially because we knew that this would keep coming up, and then we could keep promoting it every time people were arguing about it.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty smart move. You're not going to go broke anticipating this bursting forth. And what's so funny about it is it's clearly this gender anxiety, but it's very specific urban, I hate to use the term, but there's no other word for it, PMC or an overproduced elites who live in like this post-feminist world where they're supposed to be, encountering one another romantically on equal level, but there is this lack of trust and this anxiety about like maleness as this toxic set of traits. But because we're talking about a very small subset of, urban professional educated guys, it has to be personified by like the symbols around this 1,200 page fucking book that almost no one in America has read, including the vast percentage of American men, and certainly the most toxically masculine American men have not fucking read Infinite Jest. The very idea that this is a stand-in for like aggressive masculinity is just proof of how distorted this lens in. You're talking about this tiny subsection of American men who, at the end of the day, it sucks to date because everything sucks. Everyone's miserable. Everything sucks. Nobody has any money. Nobody has any security. And we just project these anxieties about the other that then wrap around these absurd fucking shibboleths. But anyway, I've actually read the book, and it's good.
I'm enjoying it so far.
Sorry to trigger you, but it's good.
We're only 42 pages in. It's going to probably take
It's
200
several
episodes
years.
2-ish years to get done.
You'll finish the project broadcasting from like a fucking ham radio in a climate refugee camp.
Yeah, and we will still continue it. It's called Infinite Cast, soundcloud.com/infinite-cast.
Yeah.
Sorry to promo on the
please do so. I hope
I know that's very gauche. So
in a year and a half, when you get to the eschaton scene, I would like to come on because that's my favorite.
So I'll pivot
part
to
of the
this.
book.
Matt, what's your favorite Jacob Wohl scheme of all time?
I mean, the thing where he had the guy come out and talk about how he got sexually dominated by Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, that's the clear answer. That's what I was going to say.
That's pretty funny. The guy couldn't even not laugh. That's really funny. He was like literally laughing while he read it. I actually saw when we saw him in was it Concord or Manchester?
What's the capital of New Hampshire? New Manchester?
I think it was Manchester. We saw him in Manchester at the lobby of a hotel. He brought donuts. And the only people who he was able to muster for his press conference were us and 2 autograph hounds who hung out in the lobby to like see political celebrities, which means they were absolute cool people and bosses, 100%. One of them was like an old dude, and the other one was a young kid in a MAGA hat who didn't recognize Jacob Wohl. And Wohl couldn't keep a straight face during that one when he had the guy come out and say that Biden has Parkinson's and that he had met him at secret rich people Parkinson's support group meetings with Michael J. Fox and shit. And that was really a high point for me. It was just thinking like, okay, buddy, what's in your head? What are you up to? Because now he is in trouble for doing actual voter fraud and voter suppression and vote tampering that could get him in actual prison, which was not a bit. Like that was actual criminal activity. And yet he was clearly doing like the Biden stuff in some respect as a joke. It's a fascinating figure to me. To me, he is the most interesting of all these guys.
The funniest part of that was the MAGA kid who was looking for autographs of like, I don't know, one of the hosts of Fox and Friends or whatever. Yeah. And we were like, hey, are you going to get Wohl's autograph? And he was like, I don't know who that is. And it was like a rock and roll autograph hunter standing 2 feet from Lou Reed and that being
serious.
Like, I don't know who this guy is.
Yeah, up your game, young man.
Yes.
Up your game, young blood. 20 minutes before that, though, when we got to the hotel, we got to see Brian Kilmeade fail to open a door for about 5 minutes. That was very funny. He kept like rattling on it and wouldn't open. God, what a dummy.
Throw some more chat questions in the chat. I have a few from a while ago, but I have no idea how relevant they are today or anymore. These are.
I just want to say one other thing about Infinite Jest, and it was a tweet that I retweeted from someone else today. Forget who it was. That it is very funny to always see these takes on Infinite Jest, specifically takes denigrating it on a website that is a entertainment product so addictive that people spend their entire lives on it and in fact lose their sense of sanity and perspective by gazing at it.
Which even I know is the literal plot of Infinite Jest.
Yes.
the unmarked vid card given to the attaché.
Yep. Yeah, the one thing
I'm through that part.
Like the thing about that book, and you'll find this out as you read it, is it is incredibly prescient. He clearly knew where everything was headed. He saw how the spectacle was isolating people and providing this narcotic for that sense of alienation. But the one thing that he couldn't have predicted, because it seems like nobody in the 90s really knew what the internet was going to be, was the interactivity. You know, because his entertainment ends up being just watching something. You know, and the thing is what it turned out is it couldn't be watching something. There has to be an interactive element. There has to be a further, not just the fantasy of the narrative that you're absorbing, but a fantasy of participation in the narrative. That's the final ingredient. That's what turns it from morphine to fentanyl. And that's where we are.
Okay, let's maybe go back to this. Let me see what this question says. I mean, I feel like I know the answer to this, but I kind of want to go back to talking about this in the future. What happens to stimulus talk to Trump in a lame duck session with a big electoral defeat?
And nothing will get passed. I mean, I think we have to be ready for the fact that I don't think anything's getting passed.
Possibly forever.
I think we'll get something. If there has to be something in January, for the markets. Like at the end of the day, when you wonder like what needs to happen, the thing that's going to be the gun to the head will always be the markets. And for just like there needed to be a stimulus for the first time, even though it was not anything anyone wanted to do as a first order preference because of the precedent it set. There's going to be another situation. They're going to need that, but not before that, I don't think. And so things are going to be really, really bad. And like I said, the thing to watch is if the Democrats win the Senate back, which I said I think they will. Watch what they do with the filibuster, because if they don't do something to reduce the power of the Senate minority to stop legislation, they're not going to do anything.
In a previous stream, I've said that my prediction for big signature policy from a Biden administration is some kind of ACA, but for climate. And I still think that might be true if they have the political capital for it, but I have updated that to having actually read something about the Congress priorities, the H.R. 1, which is the voting rights bill.
Yes, and that makes total sense because voting rights are the only thing in the Democratic putative wheelhouse of policies that they actually care about, because it impacts their ability to maintain voter share and therefore share of power. And without a consistent vote share that reflects a consistent ability to influence policy, they are not useful to the people that they work for. And so they need to protect their vote share. And the one thing that I think they've been genuinely scared of under Trump is that slide towards just outright vote nullification. Because and that's what they're actually going to spend any of their capital on, is rebalancing the political structure in a way that guarantees their continued access to vote share. After that, I think it'll be a bunch of glad-handing bullshit with no real teeth to it.
Which is very funny and perfect, because right now, and especially as we entered the summer, the Democratic leadership response to literally any issue is vote. What are you going to do to prevent them filling the Supreme Court seat, Nancy Pelosi? Well, vote. You have to vote, which is why I will be writing in Merrick Garland on the ballot in November.
Yeah.
But then their move after they get the votes is to do one big move to get more votes. And then after that, who knows? Probably
and then they'll get nothing passed, but they'll say, we just don't have enough senators. Vote, please. Now you can. You have no excuse. We secured your vote. We've secured your voter integrity. So now you better vote for us. And if we don't get anything done, it's because you didn't vote enough for us. It's the perfect. It's the logic of like a water dowser or a faith healer. If it doesn't work, it's because you didn't pay enough or believe enough, and it can never be disproven. Which is what's so funny about how many people who think like that really believe that they're being the most logical, rational adults in the room, when the thing that they pin their entire political faith on is a transparent scam. It's pie in the sky when you die, like Joe Hill, I believe, wrote.
I don't know if you have any interest in this one, Matt, but somebody keeps asking about Jade Helm 15, which is just very funny to me, because the move over 5 years from being terrified that the government is going to use Walmarts to stage a national Walmart's to stage a National Guard invasion of Texas, to the Republican president pledging to invade Democratic cities.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, though, is that none of those principles are real. Everyone's principle is power. That's the only principle Americans have, is power. And the only American value is contempt for weakness, which is why Trump getting COVID is so bad for him, because he looks fucking weak. That's it. Doesn't matter that he's infected 500 people. He's Typhoid Mary of Washington, D.C. Doesn't matter that his policies helped lead to hundreds of thousands, maybe 100,000 unnecessary deaths, and how many knows more? After that, it's that he himself got sick. He lost the mandate of heaven by contracting coronavirus, and it proved that he was a weakling. And mercy is for the weak, and the weak must be destroyed. And the strong shall inherit the weak's reward, as they said on Wonder Chosen. The strong shall inherit the weak's reward.
People keep posting this, and I'm not sure how to believe it, but apparently Facebook just instituted a full QAnon ban.
Oh, shit. That's going to work. Remember when 4chan banned Pizzagate? And then they created 8chan, which then created QAnon?
Yes, NBC News. Facebook bans QAnon across its platforms.
Oh boy, is that part of the hashtag plan? Do you think? Like, how do you square that? How are they doing right now? I mean, obviously, I know I mean, obviously, very few people are going to be really disillusioned by this. Some will. Like I've said, like everyone does not have an equal commitment to these things, and that's why you can't think of it in terms of like an entire movement flipping overnight or staying loyal overnight. It's going to be a gradual process. Some people are going to fall away. Some people are going to double down. And I'm just interested in specifically how the people who double down are going to rationalize everything, especially if Trump loses and leaves office. And especially, I mean, if he dies, I'm going to assume they just think that he's gone. But if he leaves office and is just there but not in charge anymore, I really don't know what they're going to do. It'll be very interesting.
A lot of ways for things to go.
Yes. A lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of
what have yous.
I do think it's interesting because obviously, you know, the 4chan people just created their own website, but I don't know what these boomers are going to do without Facebook. Like, all they know how to do is post. They are not computer savvy. I mean, half of these people are still paying for AOL discs, even though they have broadband as part of their cable package. All right, let's wrap it up.
Yeah, you wanna call for this evening?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. This has been another another episode of the CushVlog Grill Stream. Say goodnight, Matt.